بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and good afternoon to all of you. In a small intestine lecture, I hope after you read these slides, I hope tomorrow it will be interactive session, questions and answers in both direction, from me to you and from you to me. In topic learning outcomes, we are going to discuss the gross anatomy of small intestine, blood supply, nerve supply, lymphatic drainage of small intestine, differences between jejunum and ileum, and also we'll talk about the mesentery of small intestine. Small intestine, its length is very long, tubal structures extending from pylorus of the stomach and ends down at ileocecal junction, the junction between ileum and cecum, which is the first part of large intestine. Small intestine is formed of three parts: duodenum, this part, this is duodenum, then jejunum, then ileum, and here the ileum ends at the cecum. We call it ileocecal junction. The length of a small intestine is about 6 meters. The jejunum forms 2.4 meters and the ileum forms 3.6 meters. The first part, which is the duodenum, joining the stomach or connecting the stomach to the jejunum. It is 25 centimeter in length and is formed of, it is 25 centimeter in length and joining, as I mentioned, the stomach to the jejunum. And it is situated in epigastric region. This area, we call it epigastric region. Other structures in the epigastrium or epigastric region, we have a stomach here. This is the costal margin on the right side and on the left side, and this is the transpyloric plan. And this is the epigastrium. Structures, other structures in the epigastrium is the stomach. We have liver, left lobe of liver. We have the head and neck of pancreas and parts of duodenum and also adrenal glands. You study this in the endocrine system, inshallah. So it is of clinical importance, all this structure. Any pain in the region of epigastrium may come from these 5 structures: stomach, left lobe of liver, pancreas, duodenum, and suprarenal glands. The first part of duodenum, we call it superior part of duodenum. It resembles the stomach in the peritoneal covering and in attached attachment of lesser and greater lesser and greater momentum. So the anterior and posterior surfaces is covered by peritoneum the same as the stomach. Anterior surface of the stomach and posterior surface are enclosed between the two layers of peritoneum. Then the lesser omentum is attached to its superior border and greater omentum attached to the inferior border of both stomach and duodenum. Some retroperitoneal structures. This is also important from clinical point of view. All these 11 structures, duodenum, cecum, ascending colon, descending colon, pancreas, kidney, part of the rectum, urinary bladder, upper half of ureters, uterus, ovaries, all these structures are retroperitoneal structures. This means peritoneum only covering part or surface of these structures, not covering all structures as in case of stomach, not covering all surfaces. Parts of duodenum, we have 4 parts. First part, we call it superior part. Second part, we call it inferior or descending part. Then transverse part or horizontal part. Then ascending part or the fourth part. All the duodenum is between L1, L2 and L3 vertebrae, lumbar vertebrae. So the first part, this is the first part, which is 5 centimeters in length. And it runs upward and backward on transpyloric plane. We have also other structures in the transpyloric plane. This is important structures, and you have to know at different planes, transpyloric plane, subcostal plane, umbilical plane. You have to know all structures in these planes because this is very important from clinical point of view. So in transpyloric plane, we have superior part of duodenum, we have the head of pancreas, the 2 hilum of the kidney, right hilum and left hilum of right kidney and left kidneys, lower end of spinal cord. All these structures run through the transpyloric plane. The second part, this is the second part. It is halfway down its length in the middle, almost in the middle. And as we see here, the duodenum forming C shape and surrounding the head of pancreas from all sides. It is surrounded by the duodenum. The head of pancreas is surrounded by the duodenum. And in the midway, we have the common bile duct here, or common bile duct and pancreatic duct. They join together to form hepatopancreatic duct. And this hepatopancreatic duct, we have sphincter here. We call this hepatopancreatic ampulla. And this is the major duodenal papilla. This is the major duodenal papilla, guarded by sphincter to control secretion coming from gallbladder, from liver, and from pancreas. Ampulla obvator, also known as I mentioned, hepatopancreatic ampulla or hepatopancreatic duct. It is formed by union of pancreatic duct and common bile duct. This is cystic duct common hepatic duct join together to form common bile duct, which join with pancreatic duct to form hepatopancreatic ampulla and sphincter. They open by one opening known as major duodenal papillae. We have another small opening here of accessory, this is accessory pancreatic duct, opens superior to ampulla of Vater. The first part of duodenum is anteriorly, as we see here, related to the right lobe of liver and gallbladder. Right lobe, more specifically to quadrate lobe. This lobe, we call it quadrate lobe, and close to it we have gallbladder. Posteriorly we have the lesser sac. Here, superior and posterior to the stomach, we have a sac here, we call it lesser sac. And the opening of lesser sac, you can go here, we call it opening of Winslow. We'll see this in next slide. Posteriorly, we have lesser sac, gastroduodenal artery. This is gastroduodenal artery, this one. Then we have the bile duct. This is the bile duct on the right side here. Then portal vein. This is the portal vein and inferior vena cava. Inferior vena cava, we will see it in other slide. This is the lesser sac here. All this lesser sac behind the stomach, we enter the opening of Winslow here. Leads you to the lesser sac behind the stomach. Then this is the recess of lesser sac, and all this is the greater sac. So greater sac behind the greater omentum. The greater omentum is attached superiorly to the stomach and inferiorly to the transverse colon. So all this greater omentum. And the space between the anterior and posterior layer, we call it lesser sac, and this is the inferior recess of lesser sac. Behind the greater omentum, we have the greater sac. The entrance of lesser sac, we call it epiploic, epiploic, this one, epiploic foramen or foramen of Winslow, or opening of Winslow. You can put your finger here and you enter inside the foramen of Winslow, and this then goes behind the stomach. Descending part, this is second part or descending part of the duodenum. It goes down in front of the hilum of right kidney. So right kidney in this part. In this region, this is the right kidney here. Relation of the second part anteriorly, we have the fundus of the gallbladder and right lobe of the liver, also transverse colon. Here we have transverse, first right colic flexure here, right colic flexure come here, then continue as transverse colon, then some coils of intestine also related to the second part. We see this very clear here. This is the kidney, this is the hilum. Hilum here, we have the hilum of right kidney. This is right colic flexure, and this is transverse colon, and here we will have some small intestine loop. Small intestine loop. Then this is the horizontal part. It's about 7.5 centimeter. Descending part about 10 centimeter. 7.5 centimeter, and this 10 centimeter in length. Transverse part is the longest part of the duodenum. So it runs horizontally to the left on the subcostal plan, passing in front of the vertebral column and following the lower margin of the head of pancreas. This is head of pancreas. So following the lower margin of head of pancreas. Anteriorly, it is related to the root of mesentery of small intestine, and this is superior mesenteric vessels, superior mesenteric artery, superior mesenteric vein, and also coils of jejunum is related to the anterior surface hair. Posteriorly, we have right ureter. This is the third part here. This is the ureter related posteriorly. And right psoas muscle. Psoas muscle is on the posterior surface of the third part of duodenum. Also, we have inferior vena cava and aorta. Superiorly is related to the head of pancreas, and inferiorly we have coils of jejunum. Ascending part of duodenum, the fourth part of duodenum, runs upward and to the left to duodenojejunal flexure. Duodenojejunal flexure here. And there is a ligament connecting this flexure to right crus of diaphragm. And right crus of diaphragm is attached to L1, L2, and L3 on the right side, and attached on the left side to L1 and L2. So this we call it ligament of Treitz. Ligaments of Treitz. Ascending part of duodenum anteriorly related to the beginning of root of mesentery and coils of jejunum related to this ascending part. Posteriorly related to the left margin of aorta. Here, this is the aorta, so left margin of the aorta. And medial border of left psoas muscle. This is the left psoas muscle. So this is the posterior relations of ascending part of duodenum. About mucous membrane of the duodenum, at the beginning it is smooth. The first half of the duodenum, it is smooth. Then mucosal folds here, circular mucosal folds, we call it plicae circularis. And this will continue down to jejunum and become decreased at the beginning of ileum and disappear at the end of ileum. And here you see this plicae circularis, and you can see the major duodenal papillae and accessory, the papilla of accessory pancreatic duct just above the major duodenal papilla. Blood supply of the duodenum. It has blood supply. The upper part comes from celiac trunk, and the lower part comes from superior mesenteric artery. So the lower half, the upper half, supplied by superior pancreatico-duodenal artery, which come from gastroduodenal artery, and this is the branch. This is the gastroduodenal artery, which is a branch from celiac trunk. Three single branches comes from the aorta and supplying the GIT. Celiac trunk superiorly, then superior mesenteric and inferior mesenteric. Celiac trunk supplying the esophagus and parts of the stomach. Superior mesenteric supplying most of small intestine and parts of the large intestine. Supplying the whole small intestine and supplying the cecum, appendix, ascending colon, and right 2/3 of transverse colon, and the rest of GIT is supplied by inferior mesenteric artery. Venous drainage, I'm not going to spend too much time in all this. Venous drainage, it goes to, as the end, it goes to portal vein, and inferior vein join the superior mesenteric vein. Lymph drainage, it goes to the lymph nodes on both sides of celiac trunk and superior mesenteric arteries. On both sides, the lymph nodes on both sides, receiving the lymph nodes from the duodenum. Nerve supply, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Parasympathetic comes from vagus nerve. Also, duodenum takes nerve supply from celiac and superior mesenteric plexus. Jejunum and ileum, both of them, they form 20 feet and they are 6 meters in length. The upper 2/5 of small intestine forms jejunum, and this is about 2.4 meters and occupying mostly the upper left quadrant of the abdomen. The upper left quadrant of the abdomen, while the ileum occupying the lower part of the abdomen and occupying also the pelvis here. Its length about 3.6 meters and ends at the ileocecal junction here and opening by a valve in the cecum. So the jejunum begins at duodenojejunal junction and the ileum ends at ileocecal valve. Mesentery of the intestine, this is peritoneal fold. It is fan shaped like this. The free end is attached to the walls of small intestine, and the root of this mesentery is attached to the posterior abdominal wall by a vertical line extending from L2 vertebra and goes down to right iliac, sacroiliac joint. So this vertical lines is attached to the posterior abdominal wall. From L2 vertebra goes down to right sacroiliac iliac joint. Here, this is the second lumbar vertebra. So this is the line of attachment of mesentery of small intestine down to here sacroiliac joint, right sacroiliac joint. Goes along this line. And then it become or forming fan shape. And the idea behind this to allow free movement of the intestine because it's 6 meters in length, and to avoid any kinking or strangulation of the small intestine, so it is attached posteriorly to the posterior abdominal wall between L2 down to right sacroiliac joint. So the root of mesentery, this is the root of mesentery. This is the free end is attached to the jejunum and to the ileum. Here, this is the root of the mesentery and attached to the large intestine here, and attached down here to the small intestine. So, in general, it is a fold of peritoneum, attaches organs, which is the small intestine, to the body wall. You see here, this is the small intestine here, and this is the mesentery attached, its free end attached to the wall of the intestine, small and large intestine and rectum, and anchoring this to the posterior abdominal wall. Here, this is different layers of small intestine. This is the jejunum and this is the ileum. In jejunum, you see the arcades of blood vessels. This is arteries, arterial arcades. Is less, only one or two rows here, one or two arcades, and here we have more, 3 to 4 arcades in case of ileum. And this is the difference between jejunum and ileum about the position. This is on the left side. Here it is in the lower part of peritoneal cavity and extend down to the pelvis. Regarding to the diameter, it is wider in case of jejunum and narrower in case of ileum. Wall is thicker in case of jejunum, thinner in case of ileum. Red in jejunum is red, ileum is pinkish. Plica circularis, larger, more numerous and closely set, smaller, less numerous and separated, and it is absent in the lower end of the ileum. Mesentery attached to the posterior abdominal wall. In case of ileum, it is attached below and to the right side of the aorta. Vessels, blood vessel, arranged into 1 to 2 arcades in case of jejunum, 3 to 4 arcades in ileum. Fats more near the root and scanty near the wall in case of jejunum. In case of ileum, the fat deposits throughout the mesentery from root to the wall. Aggregations of lymphoid tissue or Peyer's patches. There is no Peyer patches in case of jejunum. There is present in case of ileum. Blood supply, as we mentioned, all small intestine supplied by superior mesenteric. Even ileocolic arteries branch also from superior mesenteric. And venous drainage, it goes to superior mesenteric vein. Lymphatic drainage goes to lymph nodes on both sides of superior mesenteric artery. Nerve supply from sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves from superior mesenteric. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you during the lecture, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum and goodbye.